1607, John Smith, a white man, and 100 illegal white immigrants sailed from England to the shores of Powhatan Native Island lands in what we now call Virginia. They set up a camp on this land and they called it Jamestown Settlement. These people came looking for gold and other goodies to send back to England, but amazingly they did not know how to farm or gather supplies and resources, so they pretty much started starving. John Smith got caught up in the Powhatan legal system and was sentenced to death on trumped-up charges. His execution was stayed at the very last minute by a young Powhatan government representative that you know as Pocahontas, who argued his case and won his freedom. Pocahontas then went on to help John Smith and the surviving Jamestown settlers from the harsh winter and land. She helped enroll them into multiple Powhatan welfare programs, including welfare, including food and housing, including education. She led agricultural programs that helped the English immigrants learn how to farm and survive in the rugged and harsh land of 1607 Virginia. These welfare programs that these white people took from brown people kept the settlers alive, but just barely. Between 1607 and 1611, there were 4 shipments of supplies and settlers that came to Jamestown. In 1609, John Smith sailed back to England to heal from an injury, and the 3rd supply of settlers and provisions set out for Jamestown from England. They were led by a man named John Rolfe. They stopped in Barbados, where John Rolfe illegally procured tobacco seeds from the Bermuda locals. It was illegal for John Rolfe to buy these seeds. In 1610, John Rolfe made it to Virginia, where he found Jamestown starving and plagued with disease, with only 60 survivors. His supplies helped keep them alive for another few months, while the 4th supply brought an adequate ration for the settlement, and Jamestown was again able to stave off starvation and sickness. In 1613, Pocahontas was kidnapped and encouraged to convert to Christianity, where she was baptized and took the name Rebecca. She soon met John Rolfe, and they married in April of 1614. 8 months later, Pocahontas had a baby. She died 2 years after that of a sickness she developed while sailing the River Thames with Rolfe. He buried Pocahontas in England and went back to Virginia. He took those black market seeds that he stored in the Caribbean. This strain was much higher quality than what was being grown in the colonies. And John Rolfe began to experiment with growing and curing techniques, and his quality tobacco leaf quickly grew in demand. Welcome to August 1916, 1619, Comfort Point, Virginia, 30 miles downriver from Jamestown. It is a full year before the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock. John Rolfe recounted in a letter the arrival of the first enslaved Africans to reach the shores of America. I quote to you what he wrote down. He brought not anything but 20 and odd Negroes, which the governor and Cape merchant bought for victuals. I want you to imagine a slave ship carrying dozens of people snatched from the western shores of Africa. They reached the shores of the English colonies. But before they did that, that ship was looted It was looted and pillaged by two other ships, the White Lion and the Treasurer. These two ships, they took those enslaved victims of war, the ancestors of Emmett Till, and they set off for Virginia. They became separated in the oceans, and by the time the White Lions reached Point Comfort, Virginia, they were in such bad shape that all they had left in cargo were enslaved people who they sold for food and provisions before moving on. A few days later, the Treasurer made it to Point Comfort with a few more slaves. No one knows how many slaves were brought to Virginia, but by the first census they took in March of 1620, before the Plymouth Rock saw a pilgrim, there were 32 recorded applicants, 17 females, 15 males. In the harvest at the end of that year, John Rolfe and the Virginia colony exported 50,000 pounds of tobacco back to England. The profits from the shipment sent back to England were able to save Jamestown and make it thrive. Because tobacco was most profitable when it's grown on stolen lands with slaves. John Rolfe set the stage for 4 centuries of American life, government, and culture, and economy.